Hi, Stretford, it's Mrs. Brooks, and today's lesson is going to be on improving vocabulary and building up detail in writing. So you're going to need your CGP Workbook for today's tasks, and we're starting on page 76, and we're going to be doing some tasks on page 78 as well. First things first, get yourself something to write with and write on, or somehow make notes. And get today's title, Improving Vocabulary and Building Up Detail in Writing, and the WALT, to be able to use appropriate and interesting vocabulary to understand how to build up detail in your writing. So pause the video and make notes of the title and WALT now, please. Can you also get down the keywords? Okay, so by the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to use different and interesting words to make your writing better and more specific, and understand how and why to build up detail in your writing. What I'll do now is to think of 3 adjectives to describe your English classroom. So have a go at thinking of 3 interesting describing words for your English classroom. Okay, let's move on to our keywords. First one, vocabulary. So vocabulary simply means the words that are in a particular language. Your vocabulary is the number of words that you know. So obviously we're looking to expand your vocabulary. There's word of the day on our SHS English Instagram that will help you to expand your vocabulary. Your vocabulary lessons when you're back in school also do that. They're really important to keep building that vocabulary. Verb is a doing word or an action. For example, run, hop, skip, jump, walk, wander. And it's also a being word. So I am happy, we were tired. So it can also be a being word as well as a doing word. Adjectives, as we've looked at in the do now, are describing words, and they're used to describe nouns. They're used to describe things or feelings or people or places. And finally, tone. Tone is the feeling or mood created by writing. So you can create a dark, menacing tone, or you might create a light, playful tone. Why is vocabulary so important? It helps to create that tone, as I was just explaining, that feeling or mood, and helps your reader understand how you're feeling or how your characters are feeling. And you have to, of course, keep your audience in mind. Think about the way that you speak to different people. So the way that you would speak to your friends would be different to the way that you would speak to your teacher or your head of year. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. So we've got an example A, and I want you to see if you can spot which word is being repeated and what is the effect of that. Also, can you work out which is better, example A or example B? A. I went to a nice Indian restaurant. The waiters were nice to us and the walls were painted in a nice shade of red. I had an onion bhaji to start with and it was really nice. Then I had a nice curry. Later, the waiters brought us mince, which was nice of them. Example B. I went to a great Indian restaurant. The waiters were friendly to us and the walls were painted in a lovely shade of red. I had an onion bhaji to start with and it was really tasty. Then I had a delicious curry. Later, the waiters brought us mince, which was good of them. Did you spot the repetition of the word nice in example A? Now, sometimes we want to use repetition. It's an effective technique that you can use to help your reader cement a point that you're trying to make. However, in this case, nice is quite a bland word, and it's not really helping our readers to understand what they think is nice, what they enjoyed about the restaurant visit. However, if you look at example B, those words that were nice have now been replaced by much better words. Still not brilliant, but help us to get a better impression of the trip to the restaurant. Let's have a look at task 1. So we're going to be starting on page 76. And this one is where you're going to be using more interesting words. So there's words that are repeated in the extract, and we want you to replace those with better words. So pause the video now, have a go at task 1, and then you can check your work on page 112 when you're finished. So how did you do? Could you make your vocabulary even more interesting? And if you were struggling with it, then don't worry too much. You can always pause after each paragraph, look back. Sometimes it really helps to go back to a piece of work a few minutes later and decide, can you improve it even more? Let's have a look now at using specific verbs. So we talked about earlier how verbs are doing words or action words. And by changing the verbs that we use, we can add much more detail to a text. We've got an example in the pink box here. I ran to the post box with a letter, then I ran to the shop for some chocolate. After that, I ran home so I wasn't late for tea. If you look at the example in the blue box, we've improved those verbs to add much more detail and help create a tone or feeling with this text. I ran to the post box with a letter, then I hurried to the shop for some chocolate. After that, I raced home so I wasn't late for tea. So by improving your verbs, then you're helping to give your reader much more information and help create a feeling about perhaps excitement in this one. Or maybe they were nervous that they were going to be late for tea. On this slide, you've got lots of different examples of better verbs that you can use. So instead of ran, we've got over here, we've got bolted, darted, hurried, scampered, raced. So we've got a lovely table here with lots of different improved verbs that you could use that add more detail and more depth to your writing. Also another table here with lots more interesting verbs that you could use. So different ways of speaking, different ways of moving, different ways of looking. Okay, you might want to make a note of those for yourself. They might be handy, or you can come back to this slide if you need it later. What we also tend to do is to add the word very to try and improve words that we're using. However, it'd be much better to use interesting vocabulary instead. So instead of very noisy, you could use deafening. Instead of very old, you could describe something as ancient. But it's about getting rid of that word very and instead using one single word, which is much more developed and interesting. Okay, let's move on to task 2 now. So we're going to be completing activity 2 on page 76. This activity is where you've got the word went and in a sentence, and you need to choose a much better word. You're going to think about the whole of the sentence and the effect that your replacement is going to have on it. So look at the whole of the sentence and think about how you could improve that word. So question 2A, Hayley went to the museum in her new car. You could have Hayley hurried to the museum in her new car. Hayley drove to the museum in her new car. Think about the effect that changing that verb will have. So have a go at question 2 now, and then you can check your answers on page 112 and come back and we'll move on. Let's have a look at some more ways of improving our vocabulary. So using interesting words really does help your writing stand out and it makes a difference. So we've got here some examples. Instead of using the word badly, City played badly on Saturday. City played lamentably on Saturday. So how are you going to find words like that? You could start off by using a dictionary, a thesaurus, going online and looking at the online thesaurus, and that will help you there. The pitch was in a poor condition. The pitch was in an atrocious condition. The referee made some very stupid decisions. The referee made some exceedingly moronic decisions. So improving your vocabulary will make your writing sound much more interesting, much more developed, and interest your reader more. However, you can't be using fancy words all of the time. It's better to drop them in here and there rather than try to use a fancy word for every single word in your sentence. There's a very famous episode of Friends where Joey has discovered a thesaurus and he says they're humid, prepossessing Homo sapiens with full-sized aortic pumps. And what he's trying to say is they're warm, nice people with big hearts. So it's unnatural to use a fancy word for every single word. It doesn't make your writing sound clever if you use a fancy word for every single word in a sentence. It'll just upset and disrupt your reader, as they'll be spending a lot of time trying to work out what your point is. Task number 3. So we're now going to do activity 3, which is on page 76 as well. So in this one, you're going to look at the box that's got 5 words in it and choose one of those to replace the underlying word in each of the 5 sentences. When you've done that, then you can go to page 112 and check your work. So pause the video and do that task now. Okay, have you been able to use more interesting words to make your writing better? And have you also learned how to build up detail in your writing? So have you thought about using interesting verbs, adding in adjectives, using a thesaurus? So have a look at some of the information here at the bottom. Have a look at maybe signing up to Word of the Day from the Oxford English Dictionary, and that'll help you build that vocabulary. If things are not going too well, then, as I said, use a thesaurus and try to improve the vocabulary that you've used. And also try to build that into your regular routine if you've got a thesaurus, or use the thesaurus online. I'm going to have a look now at adding adjectives. So as I said earlier, these are describing words and we use them to help add detail or description and create an image or a tone. So remember that tone was the feeling or mood that was created by a piece of writing. Different adjectives create very different effects. So let's have a look at our first short sentence. I ate a meal. I have no idea what kind of a meal he's eating. Good, bad. If we add in an adjective, I ate a delicious meal, then it helps give the impression that it's something enjoyable, and we can all think about what would be a delicious meal for us. Or by changing that adjective to disgusting, we can also imagine what it might feel like to eat something horrible and revolting. We can add more adjectives, so think of a nice list of 3, but don't overdo it. If every sentence has got 3 adjectives in it, it starts to sound a little bit clunky and boring, and we need to vary our sentences. So lists of 3 or maybe even 4 are really great ways of helping describe for your reader. So we've got here on the left, I ate a delicious, sumptuous, lovingly prepared meal. On the right, I ate a disgusting, rancid, undercooked meal. I've got an extract here about a village in Greece. Let's have a read through it first. Iodios is a village on the island of Tunos, 40 miles from Athens. Miles of beaches stretch along the coastline. The air is thick with the smell of pine trees, and you can sit in the shade of the cypress tree. Wooden fishing boats set off every morning from the harbour. In the evenings, the local gather in the taverna for a chat over a drink. So we have got some description in there. We know how far the island is from Athens. We know that it's got beaches. We know about the trees there and the boats. However, we've not got as much detail to help us decide whether this is a beautiful island or a revolting island. What is it like? We need to add in more detail. So we've added in some adjectives to help create that detail. Yorios is a quiet, sleepy village on the remote island of Tunos, 40 miles from Athens. Miles of unspoilt sandy beaches stretch along the deserted coastline. The air is thick with the sweet smell of pine trees, and you can sit in the shade of the tall, elegant cypress trees. Rickety wooden fishing boats set off every morning from the small, picturesque harbour. In the evenings, the locals gather in the cosy, welcoming tavernas for a chat over a refreshing drink. If you're looking to stretch yourself, you could take the extract on the left and perhaps change the tone. So add in some adjectives that would give a very different tone about this island. Maybe it could be a deserted island that's come to rack and ruin. So if you're looking for some extra challenge, then you could have a go at changing this extract or changing these adjectives and creating a very different tone. Okay, we're now moving on to page 78 of our book, and this is all about adjectives. So the first activity asks you to find all the adjectives in the extract, so you can underline or highlight them on the book. Activity 2 asks you to rewrite the extracts, this time showing that the swallow, which is this bird over here, is small and the human's powerful. So you're, just like you did in the previous task, if you wanted to have a go at it, you're going to flip and change the mood or tone. So pause the video, have a go at activities 1 and 2 on page 78. Now have a look at activity 3. So it's asking you to identify the nouns in the sentences, then copy out the sentences and add adjectives to all of the nouns. So some of you may be struggling to find the nouns in each sentence. So if you're struggling with that, then I've circled each noun in each of the sentences just to help you so you know which words you need to improve. And a top tip for looking for nouns is that they're the names of a person or place or thing, and they're also the names of emotions or feelings. And the one way to spot a noun is that it can have a or an or the before it. So a dog, an elephant, the jealousy, the hate, the love. Okay, so pause the video and have a go at adding adjectives to each of the nouns in these sentences. So rewrite the sentences using adjectives to describe each of the nouns. Okay, we're now on to activity 4. So this is where you've got blanks to fill in and you're going to use adjectives in there. Again, if you're thinking about how you can improve your work, then use a thesaurus either online or if you happen to have one at home or on your phone. If you've got access to the internet that way, then you could have a look at improving some of your vocabulary there. Finally, if you want to try and put some of this into action, then you can have a go at writing between 2 and 4 paragraphs describing an image or scene. So we've put an image on the PowerPoint here just to help you if what you're seeing out of your window isn't inspiring you. and we want you to try and use some interesting vocabulary. Got a sentence starter over here. Everything has changed. And I'd like you to use the success criteria on here to think about how you can create interesting and detailed writing. So we'd like you to include your 5 sentences, to zoom in on detail, add more detail by using the words but, because, or so, and try to use interesting and varied vocabulary. So that's a little extension task that I'd like you to have a go at. You can, of course, send that to me and I can have a look at that and give you some feedback. So adding more detail, focus on your 5 sentences. What can you see? What can you hear? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? And what does it feel like? How do people feel in this image that you're seeing? Zoom in on detail. So as we've looked at images before, pick a small section and describe that small section in clear detail. Using the words because, but, or so, using connectives will help to improve and extend your description. And using interesting and varied vocabulary. So as I said, try to use a thesaurus. If you've got your vocab books at home, see if there's anything that you can build it from there. You can always look back through this PowerPoint into the slide where we had some really interesting vocabulary in there on the different tables that you could use. Try to aim to write between 2 and 4 sentences about a particular thing. So you're going to paint the whole picture for the reader. Okay, we're at the end of the lesson. So you should have completed the tasks on page 76 and page 78 of the CGP workbook. You mark those yourself using the answers in the back of the book. And then if you decided to do the extension activity, then you can email that to me and I can have a look through it and give you some strengths and some EBIs. Okay, don't forget to send any questions, anything that you're worried about, let me know. Thanks a lot. Bye.